Alrighty, we're going to cover transitioning from the overworld scene into a town scene and back out again here. And we're going to also incorporate the phantom camera, which is a recent Godot add-on, which is very nice and it handles a lot of typical camera behavior for you. One that's particularly useful in this context is if you have a collision shape 2D or node 2D, you can have the camera not go past these boundaries. So essentially when you walk all the way over here, it's not going to show you this void over here. It's going to just keep it within the viewing area that you want to. So the transition part first, this is just the overworld scene, as you can see here, and I just have a node to represent where the town is and a collider on here. You don't want to make this too big, so when your character comes back out of the town, I actually offset the position a little bit, but obviously you don't want to have them go right back in, so that's something to keep in mind. But this is just a area 2D with a collision shape, which is a rectangle here, and we're going to connect that to the script, which I made a little enter town method here. So on body entered, so the character is going to be this character body 2D. I'm using this little collider that I use for the encounters. That's also tutorialized. So here's the script, very simple. We're gonna, if you're keeping track of game states, this is a good place to obviously change that. This isn't required for the functionality, but you'll probably want to do that. You get the scene that you want to load. This instantiates that scene. And here, this would be relevant for any game where you had an overworld. I have a global script right here, and I'm storing the overworld scene itself here in memory and the position here. So this method takes a node 2D. If you're making your own methods to connect to the events, or the signals rather, that are being fired off here, make sure your method has the same signature. So here you see it takes in a node 2D, so therefore the method you're tying it to also has to have that same signature and take those same arguments, or it won't show up in Godot when you go to pick them, just to show that. So like if I disconnect this, I'll redo it. So if I go in here and I'm picking the script on the overworld node here, if I go to pick, sorry, actually that's wrong, the Godot node rather, pick here. So here you have enter town, because that's that overworld town script we were just looking at. That would not show up if that signature did not match. So just something to keep in mind. So I'll reconnect it. That's how we do that. So here I'm logging in this static variable the position that the character was at when going into the town. That way, of course, whenever you come back out of the town and then you're going back to the correct position. So this, I removed the overworld scene, and this has to do with what I was talking about, where I keep that scene in memory for loading speed. And so instead of freeing the node, I actually remove all the objects from it. So I'll quickly go through that. So this game was just kind of a source of typical scripts I'm going to run. So here, this is, again, this was done in my scene management tutorial as well. But just to recap it, I've got all the characters in case you wanted to have more than one on the screen. But basically, this is all to get the main character. And we're going to drop them off of the scene, because if you store a scene in memory, it's different than if you were to like call queue free or get rid of the node entirely. If you're just storing it in memory, it's going to retain everything about that scene. So that way, when you add it again, when you add the overworld scene back into the scene tree, you're not adding duplicate copies of everything that runs in the ready method, like when that node spins up. So this just removes the phantom camera that we're going to add. I'm going to talk about that later, and also the phantom camera host. Those both need to come out and be re-added as well. The phantom camera probably could stay in the scene and just change the target. I'm just doing this to be certain and organized in my own brain, because it gets confusing if I'm taking away some things from the scene and then the ready method's running. I got to remember like which ones I need to remove and re-add, or which one, mess. So that's why that's happening here. And this just removes the overworld scene, using that static variable I have. So as of here, the overworld's gone. I'll come back do a little more detail on the phantom camera when we get to the camera. This is just to show the scene transition. And then here, obviously, we're going to add the town scene. And then, then your town scene's there. That's pretty straightforward. So let's just show that much. This is actually including the phantom camera. It's already in there, so you will see the effects of it briefly, but I just want to go through the town transition. So here we go in here. So that's as much as the code I've just shown does. Now we're going to talk about exiting the town. So on a town scene, I kind of like this part up at the top here, this first, half dozen or so, is kind of what I'm establishing as a template here. So has a camera 2D, sure. Whatever sound you're playing, and then the town spawn node 2D is just down at the bottom. That's just where the character is going to start when they enter the scene. The background, self-explanatory. The area 2D border, that's going to get into, this one's actually a little bit of both of a camera logic and transition logic. So in this particular case, these are both the same actually. So you see that and you see that. So there's a reason I'm separating this exit borders. So I'm going to show that with Narsh afterwards, because there I actually have two rectangular sections and transition between those. So you need to differentiate the exit border if you get a little more complicated. It's not necessary here, but it's to follow that format. So anyway, the exit border here, this similarly we connect to leave town, and on the town node itself, I just have a town script, which is very similar. So yeah, overworld town takes you in, and town is going to be on the town node, and that's going to take you out. So right here, not very complicated. So leave town, as soon as that body is exited, then it's going to trigger this method. Same principles before, same signature here. So even though I'm not using this node 2D, I'm not using the body that enters it in any way, I do need to have it here so that signature is correct. So similarly, I decoupled adding the overworld scene, since that's one you're kind of going back to. And this almost doesn't need to be broken out, but I feel like adding more later, it might be smart to break it out. And then it's also right next to the remove overworld scene, so it's clear from, readability. Again, make sure that if you're tracking game states, to go back to whatever game state you want here. But all this is doing is adding the overworld scene in here. Since this is already in memory, that's what it's going to do. And that will leave the town. So just to demonstrate that, I'll go in, blah, 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 and then back out. And then that's what I was talking about before. You do not want this to happen. So let's fix that. And what's happening there is this collider. If you spawn the character back, obviously inside this collider, it's going to just trigger an infinite loop. So I have an offset here. So when I enter the town, the overworld position that it's setting in order to be returned to, this offsets it. So I'm going to bump that up a little more. Thought I actually had that okay, but I'm glad we get to see the problem authentically. Okay, go in and out. Okay, that's really weird. Okay, there we go. So yeah, you can tweak that value, no big deal. But yeah, like how you shape that collider and everything is going to matter. So now let's talk about the phantom camera. So what's actually going on in there? A typical phantom camera setup is this, you have this phantom camera host that goes on your scene camera, and then just in the scene itself, not parent, not a child of the character, because that's, that way it's not coupled to that, which is nice. Then add a camera 2D. I think this is, I didn't see this before. That might have been the update or something that I was messing with. But anyway, it's not going to affect what we're doing. Because this is also a tool script. It's going to run in the editor. That's why it's possible to get this kind of stuff. So anyway, just to look at the camera, Phantom Camera 2D object over here, you can see the properties. Like sometimes I'll just add it to the scene, and it'll be easier to see the properties on here. So I don't use too many of these in this application, but so here they have the follow mode, which I'll explain a few of these. I think glued is just like having a child to your character or whatever, and that's how I'm going to use it in this case. Simple is the same thing, except I think you can set an offset. Group is if you wanted to keep multiple things in a frame, and I think, and then framed is like you have like a dead zone, and I forget what path is, but that's far beyond what we're going to need here. So I'll be using glued. This is all going to be done in code though. Follow target is obviously you take whatever your character in this case, and that would be what you would put in here, and that's what the camera is going to track. Pixel perfect, pretty self-explanatory. Tweens, transitions, like I said, I'm not going to use that. You wouldn't use that in this type of game, but you can have all sorts of different ways that it delays how it follows, or smoothly transitions and all that stuff. So yeah, not going to go much deeper than that. I'm going to show how to actually use this though. So one thing about this is it's a typical Godot add-on, which is a bunch of GDScript files. So one of the fun parts of that is we have to make sure we're aware how to connect that with C#. So that's what I'm going to show next here. So in the overworld scene, this again, that other tutorial can show more detail on this if anyone wants. But what's important here is the phantom camera. That's what I've added. So I did put this in this game root script as well. So I have add phantom camera host and add phantom camera. That's just going to encode, put the phantom camera host here and the phantom camera on the scene itself, like I was just showing. So the methods here, so they're going to follow the same pattern. So when you access something in GD script from C#, this is essentially the way you have to do it. You have to load the GD script object, which is the literal GD script file here, and then the Godot object. So if you had written this as a C# script, you could say phantom camera host, and that would be a type, variable. But in this case, C# can't recognize something like that because it's in GD script. So we have to. This is a way around that. So we can get it as a Godot object, and then when we hit new here, it creates the node. So we cast that as a node because that's what's going to get returned when we create that object. In the camera, which I'm having passed in here, you add the child, add the phantom camera host child, and then I return it here. Now let me explain why I'm returning that object. The camera I'm passing in is just whatever active camera you have here, give viewport and get camera 2D as a node, so it matches the type. And then since it's returning the phantom camera host, I can store it in a variable. Now those are up top here. I have the overworld phantom camera and overworld phantom camera host. The reason I'm storing them here is because when I remove the overworld scene and I want to remove the camera and the camera host, I don't have a very convenient way to reference them, in part because because of the typing I was just talking about. So right down here, I take from the overworld scene, I get the overworld phantom camera host, and then I call QFree on that, and the same thing for the camera. So since they're in a variable here, I can easily reference them that way. Again, C# isn't going to recognize the phantom camera 2D object because it's one we have to finagle from GD script like this. So anyway, back to the overworld script here. So we've done that with the add phantom camera host, and this just does the exact same pattern with add phantom camera. The arguments getting passed in here are this, of course, which is the scene, and I'm passing in the lead character, which I got up here. A lot of this is in the random encounters tutorial, how I handled getting the lead character and all that, but it's pretty simple. So this is the scene we're adding the phantom camera to. The lead character is going to be a node 2D that we want the phantom camera to target. And this null is actually the what you're going to limit it to, so like this limit target. So like I was talking about in here, so we can limit the camera so it doesn't go off the edge and where we have no graphics. So that's going to be set to an area 2D if you want to. I didn't do that with the overworld, so that's why that's null here. And then that's just handled right here. So if it's not null, then we're going to set the limit node, which we can see in the documentation right here, this node limit target. So this is where you can pass in a tile map or a collision shape 2D, in this case the collision shape 2D, and that will be the bounds instead of manually setting them. I wish they had put that before the hard way, basically. So here again, this is the same pattern. In order to get the phantom camera type, so to speak, or the object, we need to go through the little GD script grinder here. And then we can, once we have it as a variable, then we know what type it is, even if C# does it, but that's where this set method comes in. You can put in a property and the value for any, as long as the property is actually there, this will work. And you can do get the same way. So these are all I'm using. Pixel Perfect I don't even need to, but I was like, what the hey. Follow mode 1 is simple, which we talked about before. That's just going to literally, be a child to the character and go all over the place. Tween on load is false. If you set that to true, I'll show what happens. Okay, yeah, so great. So that's why I set that to false. What's going on is even if you have the camera some other location, it seems to take the default location at the 0, 0 coordinate, and it starts there. So if you load it and it's not anywhere near there, it's going to tween to the location that you want it, and that's kind of ridiculous in this case. So that's why that's false. And just to explain how I know this here, so I put comments here. I mean, you can look it's an enum, and when you actually look at the phantom camera here, you can kind of see here's 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. But that's not amazingly ideal, which the way I actually found that is in the script. It's in this phantom camera constants, which I got from the error I got. So you can see here, this is the enum, which under the hood an enum is just going to be a number. So this is where I looked up. So I mean, it's not the most ideal way to do so, but here you can see the enum. So if you want to set this stuff in code, then you can refer to that if you needed to, double check or anything. So again, the parent, like I was saying here, this in this case, this is the overworld scene. The parent is going to be the scene that you're adding the phantom camera to. So that's why I just add child and add the phantom camera. And relative path, absolute path doesn't, it seems to work, but it still throws an error. So we want the relative path to the node that we want to follow. So we, from the phantom camera, get the path to the target. The target is, in this case, the lead character that we passed in here. This is going to set it follow target to the relative path, which is really that lead character. And then I just make this a callable so I can put this whole thing as a call deferred easily. You see me use that a lot. I noticed that the more stuff you start doing with Godot, the more you're going to be using that, or you'll run into some ugly race condition or crash or error that's erroneously thrown. And here, again, returning the phantom camera because then I can assign it to the variable in the overworld. So I don't need that when I'm going into the towns, but because I'm loading those normally, but it doesn't do any harm to be there. So with that, I want to take a look at Narsh. So I just kind of started looking at this notion here. So Narsh, you can't just set the camera boundaries to, a single rectangle, for obvious reasons here. So my first thought was, hey, I'll just use a polygon. I wonder how, phantom camera isn't quite that awesome, at least not yet. And you see in the documentation, they say a tile map or a collision shape 2D, not a collision polygon 2D. And like I said, I can only imagine the logic they'd have to do to accommodate any polygon. So I get it. So in the case of a town like Narsh, you'll see this isn't quite a real world transition here. But anyway, this is where that exit border needs to be separate. So in this case, if you don't have these, the exit border, I just made a line at the very bottom. This could be any shape, but that's what this is down here, so everyone sees it, this thing right there. So it's only going to be that collider that exits the town. So let's put these back on here. So the logic I'm following is this area 2 border, area 2D underscore border specifically. That's still going to be the same, and that's going to be where it's going to plop you when you first enter the town. And here I have the same deal as before, this spawn node down here, so you'll spawn right there. So where it gets interesting is where you want to transition up to this area here. So the way I did it is for either of these big boxes, essentially, we're going to go to this change camera area method. Same thing here. And the logic is going to be whenever one of these is entered, then it's going to change to focus on that collider, that shape. So the reason we need this separate exit border, the line down here, or whatever shape you want it to be, is because if you do the original logic I had, which was, okay, if they, on body exited, if you leave this body, exit the town, that's actually how Godot works. That's not going to work if you need to do this, because if you go up here, you exit the body, you're going to exit the town instead of going to the next area. So in this case, I'm using body entered. Whenever you go into one, that's going to, focus on that area. So they both have that on this change camera. So right here is the method. Again, keep that signature consistent. This is the same way I did it in the random encounters tutorial as well. I forgot to mention I put all of the areas that are in the towns into a group to just simplify that. So over here I have town areas for each of these area 2Ds, including this one. And that's the case for Godot as well. So that's how we get all of those area 2Ds. And then I'm just looping through them, and I'm making sure, like the exit border, I'm not going to count. It shouldn't matter, but let's not bother with it. This gets all the overlapping bodies. So basically, if we hit the character, we know that's the area that he's gone into. So here I just set that variable because we need to know which area we're in, because that's the one we want to set the target focus to. So here, I should have mentioned that too. This one isn't like public and static like the overworld one, but I do need it because we're going to take that phantom camera and we're going to be focusing on a different node while we're in the town. So it can just stay within the town here. But right here, another use of that returning the phantom camera that gets created is it gets assigned to this variable in the ready method. So that phantom camera is going to be the one in the town. Same thing, set the limit node, and then we have to get the actual collision shape 2D, not just the area 2D. You need to get that actual child. So we know this is the right area, then we just need to get the collision shape 2D node, named collision shape 2D, and then that's going to set that limit node, which is what's going to determine the focus. So let's have a look at that. And actually, in my startup script here, I just comment this out. So this is makes me start near Godot, and this will put me back up where I was by Narsh. And let's actually try this out. And we can go out from that line just to show that much. Hooray. Alright, now obviously I have not incorporated any colliders or layers. That might be another fun one to do later. So just ignore the fact that I'm walking over houses or wherever I want to here. But here's that phantom camera. See how it stops me right here because my bounds are currently set to that collider. And there we are. So another thing I should just mention is make sure, remember I showed that collider. It's just this tiny thing down by his feet. So if you do this, make sure that collider that you're using to do this is small. And let's get out of here. And I also put a little bit of a gap in here, because if you're using the same logic I am, which is going through all of the areas, which is probably there's got to be a better way to do that. Anyway, if you're doing that, then this will screw up if your character is overlapping more than one of those bodies at one time. So if you're doing it, so just be conscious of that. I don't think I actually demoed walking around Godot very much, which was not very cool of me. So now that we've got the bulk out of the way here, let's demo that as well. There you go. This guy here is just walking. This is the NPC movement tutorial. I just put him in here. I can make it look like there are colliders here by avoiding certain things possibly. There's only so much in that, but yeah, again, see here, it's going to stop right at the top, and same thing left and right here. You see it's not going to let me do anything. If I go out here, now see that one takes me out of the town because that whole box is set as, exit that collider and exit the town. But as you saw in the Narsh, that wouldn't work. But hey, there we go.